All right, so today we're going over to identity death. This is going to happen very commonly in people in powerlifting. It's much worse in people who haven't played sports before because they identify so strongly with being a powerlifter. Knowing how to deal with this is going to make your life much easier. Essentially, what it is you define yourself so strongly via one small singular component of your life that when that small singular component of your life gets taken away, you fucking implode. The goal is to not have that happen. So for me, I'll tell you guys my story. I was lucky enough to be able to go and play college football coming out of high school. I played at the University of Ottawa. I was recruited as a defensive lineman. I fucked up a lot my first year, drinking a lot, not going to class. I ended up becoming academically ineligible and almost got kicked out of my faculty. And so they kicked me off the team, like, yeah, you're done, dude. So I went home that summer. I was binge drinking a lot. I was just being a fucking idiot. And I was like, okay, well, I got to do something. And I started training really hard, reached out to the head coach of the men's rugby team. I was like, hey, here's the deal, because they didn't have the same eligibility requirements. He's like, yeah, come on out. And I ended up being able to play 2 years of college rugby at the University of Ottawa. And then at the end of my second year, so I was in third year college, I had an opportunity from the football team to come back. They were giving me a scholarship. Everything was going to be great. But the problem is I hadn't properly processed that identity death. When I was still playing rugby, I still defined myself as kind of the football guy, even though I wasn't playing football and everyone kind of knew me as the football guy. And so when I went back, because I hadn't properly processed the death of that part of my life, I had this overwhelming urge. I was like, I gotta make something happen, I gotta make something happen, I gotta make something happen. And it was to the detriment of myself. I ended up having a traumatic brain injury. I ended up having 5 total concussions in 4 months, with the last one being a traumatic brain injury. I had a fucking seizure. It's called second impact syndrome. So I had been concussed the day before, and then I got concussed again the next day, which caused the seizure. I had to relearn how to read. I had to take almost a year off of school. Not lit. And that entire thing happened because I hadn't properly processed that I was a lot more than just being a football player, and a lot of my worth and value was tied up in that. And then ended up leaving football, really struggled with that afterwards, finally processed the death of that identity, got into powerlifting. That was pretty good pretty quick, right? I added 332 pounds to my total in an off season, right? First meet, I think I totaled 1525. Second meet, I totaled 1857. And I was like, fuck, I'm going to total 2K in my next meet. And obviously that didn't happen. I ended up exploding my back. And then it ended up taking me 5.5 years to be able to hit a 5-pound total PR. And in that whole time, I had kind of processed the death of my identity as a powerlifting. I transitioned it into a coach because I realized that powerlifting can be taken away from me at any moment. Coaching can't. If I get hit by a car crossing the street tomorrow, I can still coach unless I'm so brain damaged that that's not possible. So I had already kind of processed that identity. And when I came back to powerlifting when we moved to Florida, I was like, fuck it, we'll see what happens. And tore my hamstring 3 weeks out of Kings of the platform. Still set a PR total, still pulled a deadlift PR, benched a PR, squatted 5 kilos off of a PR. So pretty good meet. And then it was kind of a let's see what happens moving forward. That next prep that I had, my training total was higher than my previous competition total. I think I squatted 725, benched 424 for a double at RP7, and then I pulled 733. So it was like a high 18s total. I was planning on 1940, 1950, and then I was going to ride off into the sunset to meet after that. Unfortunately, you all know how that went. Ended up with a bilateral patellar tendon rupture, medial and lateral retinaculum, left hip flexors, tore my ITB on my left side. And then I spent 2 weeks in inpatient rehab and had to deal with that. The beautiful thing about that is because I'd already processed the death of my identity as a powerlifter, being taken out of the sport didn't really matter to me. I was like, all right, whatever, I can just do other things that I've been putting off doing because the powerlifting's been on the forefront. And it actually provided me a lot of peace because I was able to just close that chapter of my life really, really effectively and be able to invest in my marriage, invest in my business, invest in the people around me, invest in my clients, and everything got better. My life completely opened up because I had already processed the death of that identity years before. Now, the benefits of being able to effectively process the death of your identity or being able to move between these different versions of yourself is there's no psychological torture, right? You're not torturing yourselves because in actuality, this anguish that we experience is the discrepancy between who we think we are and who we actually are. And so if there's no discrepancy and you have no conceptualization of who you are, there's no discrepancy, and then you can just live your life. And it's actually much more peaceful. So that's the great thing about it. And now I go into the gym, I get a pump, I have fun, I talk to my friends. I don't really care if training sessions don't go well, I get a pump afterwards. And I come home and I work and, spend time with my wife, we watch scary movies, and it's amazing, right? Because my identity is a lot more than just a washed up power lifter. My knees don't work super well, that's fine. If everything else in my life is going great, and that's the most I have to worry about or complain about, my life's pretty fucking awesome. So the take home here is, the more strongly you tie your identity to one specific thing, the worse this identity death is going to hit you when you're eventually taken out of that part of your life, right? Some people get this beautiful, heroic end to their career where they just get to ride off into the sunset, they're happy with how things went, and then just move on. And some people never accomplish what they want and just quit. And then some people are fucking taken out of it in some kind of dramatic way, which is how I was taken out of it, right? So one of those three options, regardless of what option ends up happening to you, you have to be okay with that, right? There's no amount of bitching and moaning and complaining that's going to change that outcome. And all of that misery is self-imposed. So you're a lot more than just a power lifter. You're a lot more than just an athlete. And leaning into those other parts of your life that you are good at and you are effective at is going to make this whole process much easier. But we all eventually have to deal with identity death, and understanding that this is the normal way of things and this is the normal course of life is going to make everything much easier.